So I did the unthinkable, guys. I did. I watched the movie before I read the book. That's not something that I generally do. That's one of the reasons I still have not watched Crazy Rich Asians because it's been on my list for so long. But yes, I don't even know that I would have picked up the book, to be honest, had I known that it was a book before it was a movie, before I watched the movie, because golf is not my thing. It's not. And I still don't think it's my thing. I am more interested in it now that I've read the book, but I don't know that I'll ever really go out and play a game of golf. But anyway, as a result of having loved the movie, because it is such a beautiful movie, I had quite lofty expectations. I hoped that the book would cover so many things. Among them is Joe and JD's military service. I am prior service, and those stories are always up my alley. And I wanted to know more. But did we get it? I don't know. I'll let you know. And I also want to know more about what life was like from a firsthand experience from a Mexican American perspective in the 1950s. I love 1950s fashion. I love 1950s movies. I love studying 1940s, 1930s, all of those eras. But honestly, most of the time it is not through the Mexican American perspective. And I wanted to see if there was going to provide me a little bit of that. Does it do it? Let's talk about it. And I also wanted to know, of course, more about the boys, because the stories of Joe were the ones that were mainly focused on, at least just tangentially in the movie. And I want to know more about his father, who appeared to me to be a prior service member as well. And I was hoping that this book would satiate that appetite. Does it? And of course, I want to know if that parade really happened. So, did the book overall meet my expectations? Well, no and yes. Before I get any further, though, I do want to forewarn you that this is going to be a video chock full of spoilers. And if you're not interested in knowing anything about the book, then I definitely recommend that you click out. But to be honest, Humberto G. Garcia is an excellent storyteller. He is so eloquent and concise, and there's clearly a lot of passion behind this piece of work. So, nothing that I outline here today is going to be it's not going to take away from you reading the book. The book is beautiful and it's so short, and it is not at all something that I think any of you would be amiss to go back and read it after watching this video. And of course, there's no way that I could share with you the whole movie. So go ahead and watch it and come back and let me know what you think. I want to have this conversation, and that's one of the reasons why I made this video. Well, if you don't know me, hello everyone. I am Jessica Gibson, Jessica Gonzalez-Gibson, the leading lady of Kaleidoscopes and Polka Dots, where I sell handmade vintage-inspired jewelry that honors Hispanic American heritage. I will have a link to my website down below if you're interested in browsing it. But if you fall in love with anything, I highly recommend that you sign up for my newsletter, because you will save 20% on anything right off the bat. And of course, receive future perks and discounts as the year goes by. So there are so many reasons to sign up, and not, of course, the best reason is to stay in touch in my mind. Now, enough of that. Let's get started with today's presentation. It's quite lofty, and I make no apologies, because there's a lot to cover. Okay, so I don't know that I mentioned this, but let's go over all of my expectations. Does it cover JD and Joe's military service? No. However, I do think that the creators of the movie did go back and research maybe what service members of Mexican American descent went through, who served in World War II, and their experiences shared with us somewhat through the movie. But it doesn't. There's no mention of anything relating to this. If you watch the movie, you know that there's a reference to JD's lack of honors. And I just wonder if that is something that was a reality to soldiers of our heritage, if that's true. I'm interested. I don't know if you have any book recommendations, any content that I could reference, that I could look to, because I would love to go back and read more about this. If you do have any recommendations, do share them down below. Now, do they go into detail about the personal lives of the boys? Not at all. We don't know anything about their family, but we do know about their friendship. So there's that. Does it cover everyday life in 1950s America or 1950s Texas, Del Rio? Somewhat. And it's about as specific as the movie gets, really. And I loved that. I love that because I don't know about you, but I'm not really into heavy-handed real-life stories unless they're true crime. For some reason, I can watch true crime all day long and I'm not fazed, almost because it doesn't seem real, even though it's true crime. Anyway, so did the parade really happen? Yes, it did. It did, and I'll talk more about it shortly because I think that the book does a much better. I don't know. I can see it, probably helped by me watching the movie so vividly and so beautifully, and I think it was done so much better in real life than it was in the movie. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it because that's one of my favorite parts. So as I mentioned, it is self-published, and one of the reasons that this book was self-published is because this was almost 50 years after the boys accomplished this feat, and time was ticking. So Humberto G Garcia went ahead and self-published. He's an attorney, so he had the means, and he had the passion and the drive, so of course he did what he had to do, and he self-published through Author House. Now, with this in mind, with this being the length in mind, 141 pages, clearly I had some really lofty expectations, and what you actually get from this book is a beautiful story of 5 friends who are caddies, who are Mexican Americans, who then go on and achieve the unthinkable. Even, in today's standards, it's unthinkable. In those standards, it's a miracle, and we'll talk about it. But first, if you are like me, and you have absolutely no understanding of the game of golf, because I don't, let's go over some of the basics. This is a bird's eye view of what the game of golf consists of. If you are a golf player and you already understand, then I will make sure to include chapters so that you could skip ahead. But this is probably the most comically bird's eye view description of what golf consists of. So golf is one of those games where the lower your score, the better of a player you are. And in today's standards, from what I understand from Humberto G Garcia's foreword, by the way, don't skip the foreword if you're not familiar with golf, because he'll remind you of the rules and the expectations. So a good player averages 70 to 90 strokes per game. Great players average 59 to 64 strokes per game, and most players average 100 strokes. The course consists of 18 holes. A hole is the size of a cup of soup. So little. And your main tools are a set of 9 to 12 golf clubs. Understanding which to use is a vital skill that you only achieve through practice and understanding of the game and the physics, I'm sure. So these golf clubs are, of course, carried around in a bag, and these bags are made either of canvas material, which easily absorbs water, or leather, which repels water. And in the 1950s, here's your little slice of life, there were no such things as forgiving clubs. And of course, there's no such thing in these days as left-handed clubs for left-handed players. Can you imagine having to switch your dominant hand? I can't. It's way too hard. Anyway, and you had only 4 to 5 hours to accomplish the whole game. So to me, honestly, that seems like way too little and way too much to take on. But these details are so important to really understand in order to understand how this is truly a miracle, how their story is truly a miracle. And previously, when I reviewed it, The Long Game, the movie, I compared it to Miracle, the 1920s Disney movie that follows the story of the 1980s Olympic champions, US champions, hockey champions. I told you that this was less of a tense-driven movie, and it is. But honestly, the story is just as tense-driven if you understand all that they had to overcome and all that they did achieve, because it's an achievement. It's an achievement beyond belief. It's a miracle, hence Mustang Miracle. Okay, but let's talk about the players. The players. Felipe, what? Check. Okay, so players. The players consisted of five people: Joe Trevino, Felipe Romero, Mario Lomas, Eugenio Jean Vasquez, who is left-handed, who is also the youngest, and who also, he is such an endearing character when you read the book. I think he kind of fades into the background in the movie, but he's so adorable. So adorable. Clearly, I have a favorite. And Guadalupe Lupe Felan. And the two coaches. So the coaches are different from the movie. And they consist of J.P. Peña, the superintendent of San Felipe Independent School District. He was not the best golf player, but he was there for the boys as a coach on an everyday basis. But because he was not the best golf player, he also couldn't really correct the boys' form, and that was left off. That was something that Hiram Valdez took on. Hiram? I hope I'm saying the name right. Let me just double check the name, because I'm going to say it over and over again. I think I mispronounced Hiram. I hope I'm saying it right. Hiram Valdez. Hiram Valdez is the secondary coach, the assistant coach. He was an aircraft mechanic at Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio. He was a great golf player and was unable to make most practices, but he did assist quite a lot through travel expenses and by coaching whenever available. So before they became a team, of course, they were local country club caddies. And something to note is that this club was publicly funded. It was a publicly funded club, but it was only accessible to a certain population. So they were allowed to work there, but they were not allowed to play there. And as they developed their interest in the game, they really started taking note of what mistakes their players, the people that they were assisting as caddies, were making, what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong, and through their powers of observation, they really honed their skills. That and reading anything that they could get their hands on at the country club that had been discarded. So that was their trainer, or their training, beyond having their coach. And because they were not allowed to practice at the country club, they then created their own country club. It's called El Llanito Country Club, which translates to the Plain Country Club. This plain, or this El Llanito Country Club, was, from my understanding, a field of dirt. No grass, none, and only one hole. And as a result, they created different challenges around the field, and they knew the distance from which to go and hit the ball from to create their 18-hole course. I can't imagine. That seems like so much work in itself, like a work of art. Anyway, they loved this field. They adored this field. No, it wasn't good for practice, at least not professionally, but they loved their field. It was their work of art, and they used it a lot. And I think it was here where the miracle started in my this and their determination, which clearly is an unspoken result of their success. But anyway, so their equipment consisted of hand-me-downs, well-loved hand-me-downs, and they worked with less than 9 clubs. Remember, you need 9 to 12 clubs to play in a game. And they also were gifted pre-owned shoes, and this was all through both the coaches getting these tools for them and the players that they assisted, because word got out, and so some players started donating some of their pre-loved equipment. And they did not wear conventional attire. They didn't use gloves. They played in jeans and a t-shirt, and they had no caps. So they were in their own league. So once they did become the Mustangs, at some point, so one of the boys helped his grandfather in the morning to mow the lawn, and part of their agreement was that he would play a game of nine holes, and that was only because he would run out of time to go through the whole course before the sun went up. But his grandfather would start, and so would he, and he would move ahead of him so that the lawn was freshly mowed by the time he was done with his game of golf. In doing this, one of the managers noticed and approached him and asked him, "Hey, mister, I see that you are playing on the course. Where did you learn to swing like that?" He was like, "On the El Llanito Country Club." So he had to confess. He shared their story. He shared that he had numerous friends that played with him, and that they also caddied. And he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why don't you guys come on Mondays and practice? And while you practice, you also clean up the course as you go." So it was a win-win. So, I mean, I think that it was more him saying, "I don't want to come in on Mondays, and these boys want a place to play, so it'll be a win-win, So yes, it was definitely a win-win, because these boys were uber excited to do the job. And that is how they started playing at the country club. And the coaches, as I said, contributed to their equipment eventually. And I think it was also funded through the school district. JB would drive the whole team to the competitions in his little 1950s vehicle. Little inside, okay? Little inside. I don't know if you guys been inside of one of those, but I cannot imagine 5 boys and 2 grown men in one of those vehicles crammed up. I don't even know that they had air conditioning. I don't know. Anyway, that sounds rough, but it's dedication and love. And Harim would assist, of course, with the travel expenses. So that is the boys and the coaches. Let's talk about the author, because it's important. So this is him. This is Humberto G. Garcia. After I finished reading the book yesterday, I went on a podcast binge listen and watching. And I will have those linked down below. And I will also include them in the blog post once I write it. But he was, as a young boy, a potato picker. He, I think, earned like 5 cents for a potato of 50 for a sack of 50 pounds. I'm not sure how old he was, but he was very young when he started doing this, and for just a nickel or so. And he eventually moved on to become a lawyer. In 1970s, he attended San Felipe High School, which is no more, which he did not graduate because it I think there was a shuffle, and this high school was initially a byproduct of, we want to keep all the minorities here, and we want to keep all the Anglos here, so we're going to separate each of them. And San Felipe High School was that. But in the 70s, that was no more. And so he didn't graduate from there, but he did go to a reunion. And as it happens, one of his high school teachers, I think it was Jean, the youngest of the team, was his high school teachers. And then he went on to law school and play golf. So he didn't play golf in high school, but he did go back to a reunion. And at the reunion, they did recognize the team of 1957. And by then, he realized that he had played extensively with both JB and with Hiram Valdez, but neither of them had ever opened up about their incredible 1957 championship game. And following the reunion, he was just so inspired both by the story, by knowing these individuals, and realizing that they never opened up about it. I think it was product of how incredibly, I don't know, they were just so humble. They were so humble, and how could you fault them for it? It was a different time, and their accomplishments seemed to not really get the attention that it deserved. Right now with social media, I'm sure that it would be all over the place. But back then, it was not that big of a deal. And so they didn't think it was that big of a deal. And so when he approached the players, he was met with a lot of resistance. And this was due to the fact that they had already been promised a book by somebody else. But this individual didn't know anything about the game and didn't know how to make this an interesting story, which honestly, I just don't think that she was interested in the story in general. So anyway, Humberto G. Garcia started off by videotaping them and interviewing them, and collectively they told their story. They told their story, they told this story, and that is how Humberto G. Garcia came to write this book. I can only imagine that these men became boys when they started gushing and talking and teasing each other as they recalled everything that happened. That, I think, would make incredible TV. Humberto G. Garcia, Mr. Garcia, I implore you, please make a documentary out of all of your recordings. It would be so fantastic to watch them speak, like tell their story. I would be there. I would be so there. Anyway, there's a lot more to his story and a lot more behind the story of creating this book. So I will leave those podcasts down below. That is where I got all of this information about him. And in one of the podcasts, he actually does go into detail about what life was like for him in the growing up, and what he thinks or expects that they went through as well, which I really appreciated. Okay, now that we've taken care of describing the players, the game, and Mr. Humberto G. Garcia, let's talk about the miracle. So, the miracle, that is the state championship of 1957. The state championship of 1957. It took place over the course of 2 days. So this is the second year that these boys are playing, and the team this time around consists of Joe Trevino, Felipe Romero, Mario Lamas, and Jean Vasquez, the left-handed player who by now is playing right-handed. And because of funding or whatever, the school district decided that only 4 out of the 5 players would participate, even though all of them had achieved placement into the state championship. But the thing is funding, and you get it. There are some things that you just don't have control over. And while that's that, there's another facet to this that makes it just so heartbreaking. And that is, from my understanding again, that most teams have 5 players, but only include the scores of the top 4 players. And that 5th player is just kind of like a safety net. so that if one of them has a bad game, then the team is still, possible, can still possibly win. So that was one of their very serious disadvantages. And the other one is that they were up against a very, very strong team, stronger than the previous year. I think this was the previous year was the first year that there was this state championship competition, but I'm not sure. But anyway, so the team to beat this year was the Shamrocks. They were incredible, and they were beating most teams by an average of 25 strokes, and they felt it almost right off the bat. And not only were they incredible players, but they were incredibly hostile towards them. They stuck out like a sore thumb, given that they didn't have the proper gear and their equipment was so beloved. So they would make fun of their equipment. They would call them names. It was just something of a mind game that they were trying to play on them, is what I gathered from their behavior. Now, on day one, the day ended with the Shamrocks leading by 8 strokes. And on day 2, it rained a lot. And this is where the miracle really shines, and you can really see it. So it rained all day. And there was initially a possibility that the game could be canceled, and therefore the previous day's overall scores would be the ones that would be taken into consideration to announce the winners. But as it happened, it didn't rain too heavily, but just consistently, and it didn't affect them, the Mustangs, quite as much as the other players, because one, they had El Llanito Country Club to work with. They knew how to work with the ball off the dirt. They knew how to work with the ball under unimaginable circumstances that the other boys just couldn't understand. And they also played with bare hands, unlike their opponents who used gloves, who then were struggling because they were so slippery. And given that their canvas bags would soak up all of the water, they also had to deal with the added weight of carrying around their heavy golf clubs and a wet bag. And long, long hours of training helped them overcome those mental games and challenges. And in the end, they scored, well, first, let's talk about the Shamrocks. The Shamrocks scored an overall game of 678 collectively. And the Mustangs scored 643. That is 35 strokes better than their opponents, which is just so crazy. So not only did they win the overall, but they also won the individual medals. Gold went to Joe, silver went to Felipe Romero, and bronze went to Mario Lomas. But as the movie so clearly shows, the lack of acceptance at the time meant that there was no ceremony, and so their joy was sort of shortchanged. No, it was shortchanged. It was stolen from them. But still, yes, there was a parade. There was a parade the following Monday, but that day they all went out for a steak dinner, which turned out to be the first steak dinner for all of the boys. It is a really lovely scene to read about, so that is something that you definitely need to pick up and read on your own. Anyway, so J.B. Pena, as a superintendent, arranged for a school assembly where he awarded the boys their medals with the proper recognition that they deserved. Let me read a little bit to you from the book. I really hope that I don't get too emotional because it's happened a number of times, and I'm so sorry. Please forgive me if there's long pauses. I'm just trying to keep my composure, but let's get started. Okay, so this is what J.B. Pena said when he was giving his speech. Good morning, everybody. Many of you don't know that I had the privilege of spending 4 days with some of the best kids I have had the pleasure of knowing. I want to tell you all that I would be proud of calling any of them my son, JB said, as his voice began to crack with emotion. I also had the honor of witnessing an amazing event in Austin. No, I dare say I witnessed a miracle that really touched my heart, and those of all who supported the idea of putting a golf team together to represent all of you Mustangs, students and teachers. I proudly present to you the 1957 Class A state golf champions. Come out here, boys. Cheers erupted as the boys came out from behind the curtain, and the Mustang band started playing the school fight song. The boys walked over to JB, waving their hands to the students, who were now standing up, clapping and whistling in admiration as JB handed the boys their trophy. The boys were totally surprised, but they now began to feel what they should have felt in Austin following their victory. That they were truly champions now started to sink in. Okay. So that is... Okay, so that is what JB had to say. And, everything, I feel like everything combined is part of the miracle, but their talent and their dedication to the team is truly where their success stems from. And one of the players that they competed against sums it up beautifully with this, where he's talking to one of his other teammates and he says, "You know why they beat us today? Because we're not disciplined like them. And we don't take things seriously like they do." And there's just so much to this story that I absolutely love, and I hope you pick it up and I hope you love it. And that is it for my video today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And please also, if you haven't done so already, register to vote. This is a big year. Your voice needs to be heard. Every year that is an election year, state or countrywide, we need to do our part. As I've mentioned before, and I'll do it again until after a year probably, but I only became a citizen last year, and I'm so excited to vote. That is the flag that I received as a newly anointed U.S. citizen. No dual citizenship here. No, I am an American, and I am so proud of this country and so proud to have served and so inspired by this story. I can't even. Anyway, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.